entities covered in my updated book and to pose a question. Should other Canadian journalists be examining the openly available evidence surrounding these networks? Firstly, my book recounts reporting on a 2020 tape recording provided to me, where Senator Yuen Pao Wu is heard in a 47-minute private briefing with the Canada Committee 100 Society. This group included Conservative Senator Victor O as an advisory member, along with an individual officially listed in a Chinese United Front Overseas Leaders Group. The Canada Committee 100 Society is led in Vancouver by Ding Guo, a journalist who is also an advisor to British Columbia Premier David Eby. Other journalists participating in this tape-recorded meeting with Senator Wu later supported Liberal candidate Parm Bains in 2021. Bains had told these journalists he opposed Kenny Chu's Foreign Agent Registry Bill, describing it as an exclusionary policy. Ding Guo was also reportedly involved in the 2022 Conservative Party leadership race, alongside community leaders officially connected to Beijing's overseas influence arm, the United Front. I can provide more details later on how this should illuminate NSI COP 2024. In the taped meeting, attendees asked Senator Wu about his stance regarding United Front Work Department community group activities in Canada. These groups, according to CSIS, are central to targeting Canadian politicians for influence and election interference. Senator Wu expressed his concerns about Canada's focus on United Front groups, stating, "Whether you belong to an organization that happens to be listed as a United Front organization should not be a litmus test," and added, "I am fighting very hard against that type of litmus test." To provide the evidence of this tape-recorded meeting, which my colleague Charles Burton, a sinologist and Mandarin language expert, reviewed and analyzed for myself, I'll briefly play a transcript from this meeting.
Having said that, I'm very worried that the mainstream in Canada, including a lot of my friends and political leaders and business leaders and media leaders, are falling into a very dangerous trap where they are using what I call a litmus test to demonstrate the loyalty of Chinese Canadians in this country. We can identify, for example, your views on Hong Kong, your views on Tibet, your views on leaders, your views on South China Sea, whether you belong to an organization that is officially part of the United Front. You know, many organizations are listed as part of a United Front list of organizations, and the fact that you are simply associated with one is often used as a litmus test. And this is not a good development that I see.
Mr. Burton, the sinologist and Mandarin language expert, reviewed the full tape recording and told me, quote, "Senator Wu's briefing to Canada Committee 100 Society effectively enables the legitimacy of agencies of the Chinese Communist Party in our country. This does call into question Senator Wu's intervener status in the inquiry. Senator Wu didn't comment to me about his remarks, but said I should question the Hogue Commission, who also didn't comment. Ding Guo has said there is nothing inappropriate with Canada Committee 100 Society activities. Therefore, in Willful Blindness 3rd edition update, I write, in a way, Senator Wu's intervention in the Hogue Commission seemed to fulfill his taped pledge to the United Front. He repeatedly filed submissions undermining Canadian intelligence and using Chinese intelligence talking points. My confidence that he appeared to act for Beijing was bolstered by information from a person I call Confidential Source 1, who confirmed that Senator Wu, appointed by Justin Trudeau, was under CSIS investigation. Confidential Source 2 also repeatedly stressed that Conservative Senator Victor O, an advisor to the Canada Committee 100 Society, was a significant target in CSIS's investigation into federal election interference. In Willful Blindness, I write about investigations that began in early 2019. I write, according to 3 national security sources, Liberal Cabinet Minister Mary Ng was identified in CSIS investigations as one of 11 Toronto area candidates clandestinely supported by Chinese consulate and United Front influence networks in the 2019 election. CSIS assessed that Mary Ng was unwittingly implicated in this interference network. Despite my requests, Mary Ng and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office never responded for comment. As I write in Willful Blindness, Mary Ng was one of the key Ontario Liberal government staffers who moved to Ottawa with Trudeau, alongside more high-profile advisors like Katie Telford and Gerald Butts. 2 national security sources indicated that a specific CSIS concern was Ng's staff allegedly meeting privately with a Toronto consulate diplomat to consult on China-related issues. CSIS identified this diplomat, Zhou Wei, as a confirmed intelligence actor. According to one source, quote, "We believe Zhou Wei worked with political staffers to provide information on meetings of elected officials and their whereabouts. We know staff have direction to report privately to the consulate on Mary Ng," end quote. This is a critical detail hinted at in the Hogue Commission's initial report, which, for some reason, did not disclose the involvement of Mary Ng's staff with Zhou Wei or clarify what this implies about Ng's position in Trudeau's cabinet. Thank you.
Prime Minister's testimony last month, there were allegations of foreign governments attempted to upend a Liberal candidate's campaign due to their views being contrary to the foreign government's interests. Last year, I wrote about Kevin's ill-fated campaign to run for the Liberals and his allegations that China had a hand in his ouster as a Liberal candidate. Questions for Sam. Do you believe Kevin was that candidate?
I also covered Kevin Vaughan's allegations of what he believed occurred. I did a lengthy videotaped interview with MP Vaughan on his allegations, and I looked into his case for months. I also read your report and others, and I had no idea that this new top-tier case would be tabled at the Hogue Commission. When I saw the allegations that a foreign government had allegedly targeted a candidate because of their stances on that government, that type of case appeared consistent with Kevin's allegations. I can share the detail that in my own investigations, I heard from several Liberal Party of Canada sources that alleged after it became clear that Kevin Vaughan would be the nominee in his Toronto riding, a senior Liberal Party member allegedly started to communicate within the party, making efforts to wind back that nomination. So this is an interesting flag for me on the plausibility that MP Vaughan's case could be that serious case alleged in the Hogue Commission. Other details that were interesting were that a news story was published alleging sexual misconduct, as you wrote, Brian, about MP Vaughan. He had already, he was already in place to run, so it was up to the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister to withdraw his candidacy, and that occurred. What I gathered from the Prime Minister's testimony is he said he was not aware from intelligence of the allegations. Of course, he didn't refer to what member of his party could have been targeted. But I can say that consistent with the PRC being the by far the biggest targeter of Canadian candidates, whether they be friends of China, neutral and convincible, or foes of China, it's consistent with allegations in New York in an FBI counterintelligence probe that when China's Ministry of State Security wanted to block the congressional candidacy of a U.S. an Army veteran who had come from China, being a Tiananmen Square activist. The FBI says, and indictments say, China didn't want him to run, so local networks, proxies were employed by the Ministry of State Security with plots uncovered in intercepted communications, including that campaign workers be implanted in that individual's campaign to perhaps gather compromising activity. There were a part of the plot was potentially harming the candidate in ways that would preclude them from running, so physical violence. In Canada, I'm aware in my coverage of cases and networks that came up in the Hogue Commission from looking into my reports, I noticed a pattern that an individual that my sources indicated China wanted out of the way, or Chinese proxies wanted out of the way, was the subject of news stories alleging sexual impropriety. And, that my sources indicated that this could have been part of a plot. So to sum up my answer, with everything I know and my subject matter expertise on China as the #1 threat actor targeting candidates that they see as critical to their geopolitical aims, it is plausible that Kevin could be the case. And I think the Prime Minister, I judge, would have the answer. CSIS would have the answer. The Hogue Commission probably has the answer. So I think, as I sit here today, in my opinion, if Mr. Vuan was harmed in that way and targeted in that way, I do think, if I was him, I'd want a public explanation and a type of exoneration for a lot of things, if that's what occurred. Let me stress, I've only seen the patterns. This is part of my investigative methods to see, what sources say, can it be corroborated? I do think it's plausible that his case could be that one referred to.
Brian, can I add? So I think in my mind and in my heart, what happened to me was not an accident, but by design. And I obviously reserve getting into, I think, very intricate details on the advice of my legal counsel. But on this point, I think I can say from fact that one of the individuals who are no longer sitting with the Liberal caucus was the MPP for the riding that I now represent federally. And it's important to note that this is a riding that is not only home to Toronto's Chinatown, but where 1 in 7 of my constituents, like me, are of Chinese heritage. So by association, I think one can only assume, to the best of their ability, where there is smoke, there is a lot of fire. There are questions that need to be answered. What precipitated his departure? What did he allegedly do, irrespective of his voting record on China? And I can tell you for a fact that I have never had Toronto's Chinese Consul General on my speed dial, but can others say the same?
We'll go now online. Yeah. People on Zoom, if you have any question right now, please use the raise hand function. There's no question. That will conclude the press conference. Thank you.
Great. Just to conclude, I think it's important to point out that if this happened in the United States, there would be a special prosecutor appointed immediately. And this government is dragging it out. Why? Reluctance is abetting. What's the point of having a law? Why are we protecting individuals who are harming our country, our democracy, our people, and our interests? And this government needs to tell us why. Because frankly, I'm fed up with having to pay the price for it. Because being a doormat is not a policy. And it's time to step up and defend our democracy. Thank you.
All right, strap yourselves in, because we are going deep today, folks. Seriously deep. We're talking Canadian politics and all these swirling allegations about Chinese interference.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got all the good stuff, secret recordings, whistleblowers, and maybe even connections that go all the way to the top.
It's really quite a story, and the implications for Canadian democracy are, well, they're pretty huge.
Yeah, I mean, you've got me hooked already, so let's do this. Let's deep dive into this this whole political thriller, right?
Right, and one of the most striking things about this whole thing is that it touches both of Canada's major political parties. The Conservatives and the Liberals.
So both sides.
This isn't just about pointing fingers, it's about trying to understand how a foreign power might be trying to manipulate our system, like from the inside.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit.
Yeah.
Back to 2020, that's when a journalist got this recording. It's of Senator Yuan Paowu.
Ah, yeah.
He was actually appointed by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, by the way. And this recording is of him speaking at a private meeting with the Canada Committee 100 Society. What's the deal with this group?
Well, this is where things start to get a little shady. The Canada Committee 100 Society is suspected of having links to the Chinese United Front Work Department.
Okay.
And this department is essentially, it's basically an arm of the Chinese Communist Party. And their mission is to influence events and opinions outside of China.
Mm.
So having a Canadian senator, getting cozy with this group, it's definitely raising some eyebrows.
Definitely. And it wasn't just any old meeting either. There were some pretty big names in the room, like Conservative Senator Victor O.
Oh, right.
And a journalist named Ding Guo, who also, by the way, advises BC Premier David Eby.
Right. What a mix.
Talk about a mixed bag of political players.
Yeah. And on this recording, Senator Wu is essentially downplaying any concerns about these United Front groups operating in Canada. He even argues against labeling people based on their association with these groups.
But here's the thing. A leading expert on China, Charles Burton, he reviewed the tape.
Right.
And he said that Senator Wu's stance basically gives legitimacy to these agencies of the Chinese Communist Party right here on Canadian soil.
Yeah. It really makes you wonder about the potential influence these groups could have if they're being downplayed and even defended by, somebody in a position of power.
Especially since Senator Wu was also on the Hogue Commission, which was literally supposed to be investigating foreign interference in Canadian elections.
Oh, yeah, right.
It's almost like he was trying to throw a wrench in the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, to be fair, Senator Wu didn't comment on the recording.
Uh-huh.
And neither did the Hogue Commission.
Uh-huh.
And Ding Guo, who's the head of the Canada Committee 100 Society, he denied any inappropriate activity as well.
Yeah, it's very hush-hush.
Yeah, very hush-hush.
This was just the beginning. The journalist who got the recording actually also wrote a book called Willful Blindness, and let me tell you, it gets even juicier.
Okay, juicy. Yeah. I like juicy. Tell me more.
Well, the book claims that Senator Wu's actions at the Hogue Commission were suspiciously in line with this alleged loyalty to the United Front. It even suggests that he might have been working against Canadian intelligence.
Wait, what? That's a wild accusation.
And it gets wilder. The book also introduces a secret source who claims that Senator Wu was actually under investigation by CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service.
Whoa, okay, so this isn't just some conspiracy theory. There's actual intel suggesting that something fishy was going on here.
And to make things even more complicated, this same secret source claims that Conservative Senator Victor O was also a significant target in CSIS investigations into election interference.
Yeah.
Remember he was at that meeting with Senator Wu and the Canada Committee 100 Society?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got potential ties to both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
It's everyone's tangled up in this, but it doesn't stop there, right?
No.
This Willful Blindness book, it goes into the 2019 Canadian federal election.
It does.
And things, I'm guessing, get even more intense.
Oh, yeah. The book alleges that a sitting Liberal cabinet minister, Mary N., was also caught up in this whole mess.
A cabinet minister?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. According to the book, CSIS had identified N as one of 11 candidates in the Toronto area who were secretly supported by Chinese influence networks during that election.
Hold on. So did that mean that she knew about it? Was she knowingly working with them?
That's where it gets a little murky. CSIS assessed that Nang was unwittingly implicated. But there were concerns about her staff allegedly meeting with a Chinese diplomat who had been identified as an intelligence operative. Not a great look.
And did Nang or Trudeau's office ever address any of this?
Nope. Not a word. So we're left with this, cloud of suspicion hanging over a sitting cabinet minister.
Wow. Okay, so much to unpack here. We've gone from a secret recording of a senator to allegations of Chinese interference targeting both conservatives and liberals. And it sounds like we're just getting started. Where do we go from here?
Well, buckle up. Things are about to get even more personal. Next, we're going to explore the case of Kevin Vaughan, a former Liberal candidate who claims that Chinese interference basically led to his downfall.
Oh, man. This is getting good. Can't wait to hear about what happened to him.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this whole web of intrigue with senators and cabinet ministers all caught up in these allegations of Chinese interference.
Right.
But now we're going to hear about this former Liberal candidate, Kevin Vaughan, who claims that he was personally targeted. What happened to him?
So this is where we really start to see how these allegations might play out in a very real way.
Yeah.
A very personal way.
Yeah.
Vaughn's experience actually echoes some pretty explosive testimony that came out of the Hogue Commission.
Yeah.
They were investigating what they called a top-tier case, where a foreign government tried to, sabotage a liberal candidate's campaign because of their views. Sound familiar?
Yeah, it's giving me some serious deja vu. So what exactly happened to Kevin Vaughn?
Well, remember that journalist who broke that original story about Senator Wu's recording?
Yeah.
Well, they dug deeper into Vaughn's case.
Okay.
And what they found is pretty unsettling.
Okay, do tell. I'm all ears.
All right. So according to the journalist's investigation, sources within the Liberal Party itself
Oh, wow.
claimed that there were these efforts to undermine Vaughn's nomination once it became clear that he was actually going to win. And then almost like clockwork, a news story pops up alleging sexual misconduct against Vaughn.
Ugh. It's just awful.
Yeah.
It's like they were trying to just smear his reputation and destroy his chances of winning.
And sadly, this kind of tactic is something that the journalist had seen before.
Okay.
It seems like a bit of a recurring pattern. Individuals who are targeted by these operations often end up being the subject of news stories alleging sexual impropriety.
It's like the classic smear campaign.
It is.
And it can be incredibly damaging.
Absolutely. And it's not just limited to Canada either. Remember that FBI investigation into Chinese interference in a U.S. congressional race?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they found evidence of very similar tactics being used there. They uncovered these plots to sabotage the campaign of a U.S. Army veteran who had been critical of the Chinese government.
Okay, so this is a global issue then, not just a Canadian one. But how did they try to sabotage this U.S. candidate?
Well, they used a bunch of underhanded tactics. Like they tried to plant campaign workers to gather dirt on the candidate.
Oh, wow.
And they even explored the possibility of physically harming him, like to stop him from running.
Wow, that's taking things to a whole other level.
It is. And what's even more chilling is that Kevin Vaughn himself believes that what happened to him was deliberate.
Yeah.
He doesn't think it was just a coincidence that these allegations came out right when he was poised to win.
I mean, when you connect all the dots, it's hard to disagree with him. This isn't just some political game. These allegations suggest that, real people's lives and careers are being impacted by this. It's really unsettling.
It is. And it really points to a much bigger issue here. This isn't just about influencing elections. It's about China potentially exerting its influence on Canadian society as a whole.
Okay. My mind is officially blown. We've got secret recordings, cover-ups, potential smear campaigns, and now we're talking about physical intimidation tactics. What's the takeaway here? What does it all mean for Canada?
I think it means we need to pay attention. What we're seeing is a pattern of potential Chinese interference in Canadian politics, and it's not limited to one party or the other. It's about the integrity of our whole democratic process.
And it's not just about influencing election results, right? You were saying that this could be about China trying to exert influence on Canadian society, as a whole. What does that even look like?
Well, think about it. If they're willing to go to these lengths to influence elections, what else might they be trying to influence? Could it be media coverage, business deals, even community organizations? The possibilities are, kind of disturbing.
It's a chilling thought. It's like this, this invisible hand trying to shape things from behind the scenes. But what can we even do about it? It feels so big and overwhelming.
Yeah, you're right. It is a complex issue, but I think the first step is awareness. We need to be informed about what's happening. We need to understand the tactics that might be being used.
So knowledge is power. But just knowing about it isn't enough, right? What can we actually do to, protect ourselves and protect our democracy?
We need to be vigilant. We need to ask questions. Don't just accept things at face value. Look for reliable sources of information. Be critical of what you read and what you hear.
And I guess we need to hold our elected officials accountable, too.
Right. Absolutely.
Make sure that they're taking this seriously and, putting safeguards in place.
Absolutely. Demand transparency. Push for stronger laws and policies to prevent foreign interference. And don't be afraid to speak out against any attempts to undermine our democracy.
Well, this has been a wild ride. I've gone from a secret recording to allegations of smear campaigns and intimidation tactics. It's clear that there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye.
Yeah. And it's a story that's still unfolding. We need to keep digging for answers, keep asking those tough questions, and keep the pressure on to protect our democratic values.
Well, folks, that's our deep dive into the world of Canadian politics and the unsettling allegations of Chinese interference. It's a complex issue, but it's one that we can't afford to ignore.
Yeah, I'll leave you with this. If these allegations are true, what does it mean for the future of Canada's relationship with China? That's something we all need to be thinking about.
It's a question with no easy answers, but it's the conversation that we need to have. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking questions. Our democracy depends on it.